I am the Epileptic Explorer, and today we will continue our reading in Last Days by Adam Neville. This is one of his, uh, it's one of quite a few novels that he's written. One of his well-known books is a Netflix film called The Ritual, which I will look for at a later point and maybe read to you guys later. But for right now, we will go ahead and continue reading uh, Last Days. Now, unlike my other videos where I stop at a chapter, I had to stop in the middle of a chapter. So let me go back. I need to go back and see which chapter that was. Because it was a long chapter. Okay, I think yes. Okay, beautiful. Oh yeah, okay, cool. So this is the continuation of chapter 19. I think I remember. Yeah, I remember where I left off. All right, so we will continue reading chapter 19 of The Last Days. What? What has? The dreams and the changes that come with the dreams. When your own hands and feet, arms, legs ain't your own. Last two places I started waking up in another room. Not one I even recognized. That's why I moved. But it did no good. She shook her head and sighed, resigned. At the mine, like I said, something would get me out of myself at the mine. I used to dream that I was above the desert, just up there over it, looking down. Back then I told myself it was drugs. Who knows? We took a few. But these past few months, when it all started up again, I've been thinking that was not enough for Catherine to take our money, our freedom. Not enough. It was like she wanted our bodies too. We were? Our minds. Us as people. She hated it. Did everything to get rid of us inside. It's why she took the kids. She didn't want us inside our own children. She wanted them to empty. Martha, where is your son? Safe. Courts took him because of the way I was living. Then I got him back in '83. Never got my stuff together that time neither. But I got it together enough to put him somewhere safe. 'Cause it was never over. Not even in '75. Not today. Bridget knew that. Martha teared up again, looked away from them at the window. I'm the last. Catherine came back for the rest of them. She nodded to herself. And I can't run no more. It stops here. She turned her head quickly to face Kyle, at where he gaped at her, ashen-faced, across the table. Something you should see. Max wants you to film it. Oh, sorry. Something you should see. Max wants you to film it. She stood up. You want to see the blood, friends? You need to come with me. She looked at Dan. You better bring the camera before they fade. Wood doesn't hold them for long. Or plaster. But the bricks keep their shadows best. They passed rooms more somber than empty churches, feet thudding on the hollow, uncarpeted stairs. They became featureless silhouettes themselves, moving up and deeper into the dim house. At each of the two windows they passed, Kyle felt the urge to pause and peer longingly through the glass, but his stomach defined itself with sparks of nervous electricity because we was both reluctant and morbidly excited about bearing witness to what had followed Martha here. Down a hallway, barely lit by unshaded yellow bulb, and between closed bedroom doors, Martha led them to a short staircase at the end of the hall on the first floor. 4 steps up, and Martha raised the hatch to allow access to the attic. She looked over her shoulder at Kyle and Dan. They come in through here. Kyle and Dan exchanged looks. Dan started to grin anxiously over the viewfinder, but when he saw Kyle's face, his fragile need for levity vanished from his eyes. Perhaps he too recalled the fragments of things glimpsed on the walls of places they had been to, and captured in jerky footage while they struggled to breathe through their panic. Carrying the lights, audio equipment, camera, and tripod between them, Kyle and Dan struggled through the narrow hatch and followed Martha into the thick, dusty air beneath the steep-sided cross gables of the roof. Kyle found some empty floor space and settled the sound equipment and the camera's tripod upon wooden boards. Light from an arched window cut long, thin stripes across the dirty wooden floor, but left the sloping inside of the roof in deep shadow. They were surrounded by splintered tea chests, bordered with rusty iron, a pushchair furred with dust, 2 large suitcases on wheels, Christmas decorations in a box marked Renzo. You gonna need them lights to see it. Power's out up here. Dan ran the extension lead back down to the first floor to find a power socket. Kyle set up the tripod and saw to the sound. When Dan returned, he extended the lampstands. He pointed the lights underneath one side of the ceiling that Martha nodded at, a cigarette burning between her yellow fingertips. She stood between bales of old sheets under a wooden stepladder and an office desk made from gray steel. The lights hummed, then clicked into a sudden warm and welcome explosion of white light that filled the main gable, but through the corners of the cross-section and into shadow. And at first, as they all stared at the underside of the roof, Kyle could only see broad wooden boards stained with watermarks. He nearly asked what it was he was looking at. Dan stared into his viewfinder, zoomed in, zoomed out, searching, and then the comprehension seemed to come into them both suddenly and simultaneously. Yikes. Oh no. Is that... Martha looked satisfied, though also uncomfortable at the evidence of what appeared before them. Some kind of hideous expressionist art that used to be the gable rafters and vertical boards of her attic as a canvas. Much of what was visible was striated, formed into moist-looking seams. The rest had seemingly soaked into the surrounding roof timbers and faded or disintegrated into a murk of scraps, either greasy, opaque sections that lacked detail or half-completed portions of dark limbs and torsos. It appeared to Kyle instinctively as if a motley and desiccated crowd of figures had all tried to force their way into the attic space, but become stuck on their way through the merely faded away to leave ghastly imprints of the emaciated forms behind. He stared at the most complete shape. Tiny steps of a spectral ribcage led up to the profile of a face, caught in the act of a scream. Impressions of a full set of unnaturally long teeth were intricately detailed across an empty eye socket and a nose incompletely formed from what appeared to be cartilage, but not entirely obscuring these features. Long fingers had been clasped. A smattering of carpals and forearm bones appeared to protrude from the plain wood. It was like the small figure had been suddenly horrified at the sight of something awaiting it inside the attic. which had also stopped its progress. It was small, unappealing, infantile. Here, look, Dan whispered, his voice tight with fascination, but also shock. Kyle looked at the end of the camera lens and followed a straight trajectory of what Dan filmed near the apex of the roof, beneath the main beam. You seen that? Kyle was, though wished he were not, and longed to be back outside and not staring up, unable to breathe or blink at the figure with a complete pelvis that clutched at its throat with indistinct hands. Smooth arms crossed its chest. A suggestion of hair fanned about the bony face. The figure caught in some strong headwind as it birthed inside the attic space. Bulbous bulb joints and long fur femurs defined its legs, but the lower limbs were tangled behind it from the knees down. Kyle swallowed. What? When? Heard him 3 weeks back for the first. I was in bed. Heard him through the ceiling. Up here. Knocking. Bumping. Trying to get in. Man across the street knocked on my door. Was the only thing that gave me the strength to come downstairs. He was worried that I had a fire. Said he could see smoke. Martha sighed. Weren't that kind of smoke. I wanted to tell him. She shrugged hopelessly. You've seen this before? You've seen this before? Martha nodded. It's why I moved on so much. Same thing. Last 2 places. What are they? Martha looked into Kyle's eyes so fiercely. He withered inside. Old friends. She turned her head away and looked at the mottled roof, what Catherine brought down. Kyle couldn't slow his heart. There we go. Where was I? Oh, okay. Kyle couldn't slow his heart. It beat, paused, gurgled, unhealthily. He kneeled down on the floor. Dan asked him if he was all right. He couldn't answer. Martha remained preoccupied with her recollections. These come two nights back. Nearly made it all the way through, but I switched the lights on that Max sent me. And lights? What lights? Max? Dan said. Martha nodded without looking at him. It don't matter none. Just keep coming. Last night they chewed through the wires in here like rats. With what they's got left for teeth. Kyle put his hand on Dan's thigh and pulled himself to his feet. Thought they was birds the first time. When I went into the spare room I had in my old place, it sure smelled like a whole flock of dead ones that could still sing. Thought a pipe had burst too, but it weren't. It was them coming for me, same as they come for Bridget. She told you that, Bridget? Martha nodded. Out in her place in Denver. We spoke every day on the phone since it started up again. They came for her first, she said. Martha's voice trailed off, and she touched at the corner of an eye, sniffed. She said they was going to take her into the sky, like they did with them dogs at the mine. But not if I ain't here for them to get a hold of. That was the last thing she told me. Martha turned away from the roof and walked to the hatch. I'm beat. Can't do no more. There's nothing else to tell. Just one more thing I got to show you. She paused and looked back at Kyle with her red and shining eyes. Sometimes they leave things behind. It was a shoe, and probably the most horrible thing of all, amongst all of the horrid things she had recounted and then shown them. Kyle couldn't touch it. Dan filmed it closely at where it sat on a sheet of newspaper in the middle of Martha's kitchen table. Found it in the attic. Left behind means they is real close. It was small enough to fit a child. Hard as wood and black as coal. Charred, perhaps, or petrified, but once leather. The little pointy toes curled at the tips. Small holes were visible on the uppers, and fragments of stitches where the worn sole met the heel and toe of the shoe. You seen anything like this before? Sorry, you seen anything like this before? Kyle asked Martha, who stood by the big sink, smoking and staring out into the overcast sky. She nodded. Catherine and the seven called them heavenly letters. She said it was manna, a sign, for the time of ascent. They kept bits of clothes in his chest, collected them. They looked real old and burned. Scraps they found in the desert to start with. Belial would bring them back to the mine. Then they was appearing on the floor of the temple after the sessions. First I thought it was a trick because Catherine had plenty of stuff like that was brought from France, or holy relics. She showed us, but like I said, we brought things down inside that place to be with us. Never saw who left them, but we smelled whoever they belonged to for sure. Sure enough, just like there was dead men standing right next to us in the dark. What is it? What did she say to you? Back there, Kyle asked, when Dan slumped into the passenger seat and expelled a deep, weary sigh. Because he had the keys and because he was desperate to leave the house. Kyle was the first back to the car, and he'd remained speechless with shock until he'd loaded the back seat and trunk with an automation. But he'd seen an intense exchange between Dan and Martha on the porch before they said goodbye. Dan turned to Kyle. Though his unshaven face betrayed some relief that the shoot was over, he remained tense. She said that we're not the first. Kyle's teeth were clenched in a grimace. He eased his jaw apart. And? Not the first movie people that Max sent out here to interview her. Someone else was here. Last month. Dan looked puzzled. Maybe it was too freaky even for him. I could excuse that. Who? Malcolm Gonal. Gonal? Kyle raised his hands and slapped them onto the steering wheel. Gonal? Why didn't Max tell me? He builds the whole thing up to me as some kind of exclusive project that only I could make happen because he was let down by his team. It was trash. It's all trash. Gonal was his team. That fraud. Max told Martha not to tell you. Said if she did, she wouldn't get paid. She wants to give the fee to her kids, so she agreed. But what? But she could see that we're involved. She guessed we've seen things. Said she knew pretty quick, and she warned me, mate. Warned me to stay away, to not make the film, because we are in danger, serious danger. Dan looked through the windscreen at nothing in particular. Bit late for that, I told her. Kyle thrust his face into his hands. He dragged his fingers down his cheeks, opened his eyes wide to cleanse them with sunlight, to rinse them from the appalling darkness of that house. Dan nodded. Max is using us. But I don't know why. What do we do? Kyle rested his forehead on the center of the steering wheel and shrugged his shoulders. I'm tired. I'm just so tired. I need a drink. And that's the end of chapter 19. We will go ahead and yes, we'll go ahead and read chapter 20 to try to get another full chapter in. Alright, chapter 20. The Regal Motel, Seattle, June 22nd, 2011 at 10 p.m. It had gone dark. Outside his room, the distant traffic sounds were relentless. One more thing to keep him awake. Kyle sat in silence, propped up by pillows on top of his bed, in both shock and half-suspended disbelief that he was in possession of such strange material, and that they had been privy to so much tragedy secondhand. He spent the afternoon and early evening methodically working his way through a rough cut of Martha's testimony, before going back over the Sweeney and Aguilar interviews to check on corroborating details. Keeping his hands and mind focused was the only thing that prevented what felt like a total mental breakdown within a maelstrom of terror. Dan had obsessively cleaned lenses, checked the camera functions, and recharged batteries while Kyle worked on the edit. There's trash all over these lenses, he'd said when Kyle asked him to take it easy and go into Seattle and relax while he worked on the rough cut and hard copy shop log. It was the most they'd said to each other since checking into the motel. Early the next morning, they would fly back to London. The last interview was a wrap, and they should have been out celebrating with a steak and a few beers. Both of them knew it, but didn't raise it. They huddled together within a silent, uncomfortable anticipation, and anxiety about what happened next, because nothing felt finished. It was as if they had learned just enough to become implicated in a thing with terrible repercussions they didn't understand. Earlier that day, his fascination with the Colt had finally turned the corner into a profound disgust, and his irritation with Max had evolved into a rage that left him dizzy. Now the shoot was over. It was as if his fear and confusion, dread, had waited to really kick off. Organizing the shoots, traveling, filming, making rough cuts, half absorbing the madness, and pipe dreaming the film's potential. The effects of his exposure to such dysfunction had built without being fully confronted. He only acknowledged it now, and it felt too late to rewind to a place of safety and familiarity. Typical. He had been committed, absorbed and unthinking, intentionally, because the story was so good he felt like he'd been damaged by it, permanently. Every bit of secondary reading and research he'd fast-tracked into his mind since taking the assignment had coalesced into a size and weight sufficient to pull him down. In planes and hotel rooms and inside his flat, he'd read and watched anything he could acquire connected to 60s and 70s Colts to try and gain perspective on Sister Catherine and her merry band. And he found little he liked. In a fortnight, he'd saturate himself with manipulative sociopaths, malignant narcissists, murderers, sadists, rapists, violent criminals, ludicrous messiahs, and absurd prophets. Let it spin round with nervous energy, tobacco, lack of sleep, take out food, and hard liquor, terminal harm, the nightmares, hallucinations, the things on the walls. It all had to come back out sometime. Through the coming night, he expected to endure the same restless and haunted dreams plaguing him since Normandy. And when he was back in his own bed, what then? Would normal sleep be possible again? If so, when? Sleeping pills and a psychotherapist. Maybe it was time for that. He now wondered if the last days had somehow become entangled with all of the unresolved ambition and angst and disenchantment inside him. He didn't know. But what he had learned the hard way was that he no longer knew when to apply the brakes. Was there anything he wouldn't film with the same fastidious compulsion? At 10, he closed his laptop and peered around the plain white walls lit by Max's dawn light visor. It had become a habit. Dan stowed the equipment in his room next door, walked back into Kyle's, and slumped in the chair in front of the television. Slowly, he worked his way through a bag of fries and the fried chicken pieces on his lap. Kyle, he stared at the mirror on the wall at the foot of the capped a bottle of wild turkey. Two crumpled beer cans lay on the bedside table. Red rimmed eyes and a pale face emphasized the dark rings under his eyes. They looked bruised. The face familiar to him since he met Max. Coincidence? Not likely. A big, reckless swing drained the whiskey from his glass without looking at Dan. In a room as bright as a solarium, he began to speak as much to himself as anybody else. You know, Sharon Tate was 8 months pregnant when she was stabbed 16 times by a 21-year-old girl, a member of Charles Manchin's family, called Susan Atkins. Dan watched Kyle with the same uncertainty with which he had considered his friend since leaving Martha Lake's house. Dan had seen him look this way before, when his idea for ufology documentary was stolen by Unreal Pictures, when his last two girlfriends dumped him for wankers higher up the food chain, and after his last 3 funding applications were rejected. Falling down in front of Dan was becoming another bad habit. 3 of his group, known as the Family, also killed Tate's house guests, shot, strangled, and stabbed 3 people, as well as a 4th victim who just happened to be leaving the house that night when the killers showed up. That guy really lucked out. He'd only been visiting the caretaker. The killers wrote graffiti on the walls in the victims' blood. They wrote "pig" on the front door. Manson had sent his young followers on a creepy crawly to kill a record producer, a guy who used to live at the address, who rejected Manchin's music. But the guy had moved out and rented the house to Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. The next night, Manson's assassins drove to another house in LA. It could have been selected randomly, or it was somewhere the cult had hung out before. It didn't matter the married couple they murdered were strangers. They wrote "death to pigs" and "rise" on the walls. They used the victim's blood again. Dubbed "Hilter Skelter" on the refrigerator door. It's supposed to read "Helter Skelter" to kickstart Manson's race war, as foretold in the lyrics of the Beatles' White Album, but they couldn't even spell it. Kyle, it's over, yeah? Kyle ignored him. Manson's family also killed and tried to murder anyone that turned witness and stood up. was I? And stood up to stood up to Charlie. They once tried to kill a girl using a hamburger laced with LSD. Manson even had his own defense lawyer murdered during the trial. Kyle, the youngest of the killers in the family, was 17. The oldest was 26. Most of them were about 20, and when Manson was in prison, his followers carried out armed robberies, kept up the murder count, planned to hijack a 747, and to kill a president. They came close with President Ford, Manson's number one. Squeaky got 2 feet from the president in his motorcycle. She was dressed in a nun's habit, but the gun didn't go off. She hadn't chambered around. She still lives close to San Quentin prison to be near Charlie. She thinks he's Jesus. Mate, please. Kyle poured another shot of whiskey, gulped at it. The Reverend Jim Jones had 900 of his followers poisoned or shot during the White Night in Guyana in 1978, a mass suicide. The first to die were a woman and her 1-month-old baby. Many of his people took the poisoned grape squash willingly. They queued up to drink strychnine from paper cups, or to be injected with it. A doctor prepared the poison in a vat, but about 60 people refused to go and were murdered. They were shot by the security guards or forcibly injected the strychnine. The children that resisted had strychnine fired down their throats with syringes. The killers aimed for the swallow reflex to make sure the poison went down. They died in agony, contorted, bleeding, vomiting, and all the while Jones droned and screamed through his PA system. Dan stood up. Okay, I get the picture. Geesh, Kyle, enough already. Really? Dan's face was not only fixed with disapproval, but distaste. You're getting way too far into all this. Now is not the time. I came out here for you. I didn't want to. Kyle surged with fury. Dan had not read any of the research notes and still hadn't even opened Levine's last days. He doubted Dan had even pursued a single Google search into what they were filming, what they had investigated, dug up, and maybe even brought back, because Dan didn't need to. He just messed around with the camera and the equipment, snarfed junk food, guzzled beer, snored like an oaf, and kept him awake after he did all of the driving, the thinking, the planning. How could this still only be a job to Dan? A favor? How could he maintain the indifference? Into it? Did you say into it? Dan read Kyle's expression, looked away, then peered back at him warily. You know what I mean. No, I don't know. It's messing with your head, mate. You're starting to freak me out. If the truth be told, I knew this would happen. Knew it. Thought it was going to be me. Is it any surprise? Dan sat down and took a sip from the beer can that looked tiny in his huge paw, and then stared at his feet again. Didn't have to be this way. We could have blown this off. I told you. But no one can tell you anything, they can they? Kyle stopped listening to Dan. He listened to his own thoughts instead. You saw those things in her attic. France, London, the same thing. And on my kitchen wall. You're okay. It's me. Me. I'm crazy. I crazed myself. Dan looked at Kyle ruefully, critical. Dan looked at Kyle ruefully, critically, like Kyle was embarrassing himself in public after too many drinks. Kyle stood up and seized the sides of his head. What am I doing? He asked himself. What am I doing here? Hey, chill, yeah? Take it easy. Don't start with that trash now. You talked me into this, yeah? Remember that? Remember that. And I need you to keep it together until we get home. Kyle turned on Dan. It's different now. Out here. A whole new level. I can't take it easy. He moved closer to Dan, stared into his friend's big floored face. We're being tricked, lied to. This could be some serious trash we're in now. And that's what Martha said. These people, he wanted to add these people. He wanted to add these people. We are trying to understand would have killed us without remorse. Could such sadistic fury be erased even after they had gone? That's what he wanted to know. Could such a pathological desire for power and control fade like the ink on a police report in some locker, or the pages of an out-of-print true crime book? True crime book? But cool it, yeah? Dan now looked like he was trying not to smile, which made Kyle's inarticulate frustration ratchet higher to a place where all control of what he said and did could be lost. No! He stepped across the room, took a swing and punched the wall. Imagined it was Max's little orange head with the Barbie doll hair. He stepped back, held his hand, bit back on the emotional incoherence engulfing him. A tiny rational part of him warned he might destroy something of value again. He thought of the mobile phone he'd once smashed against the wall of his flat, and of the splintered laptop thrust deep within the dustbin. Yikes. He felt sick, lightheaded. His vision swooped. He'd drunk on an empty stomach, was drunk, hadn't slept in. How long? Not for more than an hour or two in America. Not a wink on the flight over. Barely got to his head since they returned from Normandy. How long ago was that? A matter of days. It felt like years. He was coming down too fast. He kneeled on the floor and bent over. Every muscle in his body taut, and the expression desperate to come out one way or another, and hardly in the way of his choosing. Slapping the carpet tiles on the palms of both hands, he shouted, "No!" Then looked up at Dan. It's too much. He could not stop himself and began sobbing. He drawled back at the tears, but they wouldn't cease. Too much. I can't. Mate. Dan kneeled on the floor beside him, but kept his distance. These people, what's wrong with them? Is this what it comes to? Power? This what it does to us? She bullied them, raped them, robbed and murdered her own people who gave her everything. She slit their throats, buried them alive for all we know. Why? They were cursed as soon as they met her. It's like Martha said, they were cursed. Kyle rolled onto his back, kicked his legs straight, wiped his eyes. Is it any different now? People, Dan, they'll do anything. Anything for status, money. The psychopaths we've worked for, the stolen ideas, everyone stabbing people, everyone stabbing everyone else in the back. For what? For some lousy trash that goes on the telewatt ounce? Who needs it or wants it? Whoever asked for it. And why give these evil bits of trash and any more attraction, eh? Manson, Jones, Sister Fat Catherine. What am I doing in America messing around with their garbage? Oh, Catherine had her needs. Needs had to be adored, worshipped. It's no different now, mate. Big brother, same thing. I'm a twatish celebrity. Strictly come dumb dancing on ice. Excuse me. Dan started to grin, then laugh, then wheeze. Can I film this for the DVD extra? Eh? Is this it, mate? Is this the best we can do? After millions of years of evolution, we start stupid cults of celebrity and feed the egos of maniacs until they take our money. Well, cut our throats. We should be cutting their throats. Kyle felt his rage deflate. He closed his eyes and let the warmth inside his blood take him over. His head spun. He felt sick and opened his eyes. I just think I'm done, Nate. With it all. Life, work, people. They will be the will of people. The will of them, Christ Almighty. He briefly visualized himself living alone, growing his own food, drinking water from a well. He imagined the silence. Maybe I should quit now. Get the fee, pay off my debts, and just go. You're too sensitive for this work. Always have been. Kyle didn't acknowledge Dan's remark. He'd heard it, suspected it of himself, and denied it many times before. You know, in the airport coming over, I watched the people around us. Kyle shook his head, where he lay on the floor, staring at the polystyrene ceiling tiles. So many of them thought they had an audience. They were performing because everyone thinks they're on stage these days. The show of me, mate. Facebook, Twitter. Twitter, Twitter me, mobile phones. Hey, where was I? We're in, we are in an audience to every person with an iPhone. I can't turn on the telly without some silly thing with big eyes. Yikes. I am tired. We are an audience. iPhone can't turn on the telly without some silly person with big teeth showing off. Okay, after this chapter, I'm probably going to take a quick nap. Ay, ay, ay. It was the constant thrust of the personalities, the desperate need for attention, for their own reality drama, for their own public relations, rituals to be seen, heard, remembered, a whole noise of self-interest. Sister Catherine was just one endgame in an age of pathology. Dan's laughter filled the room. Reaching over, he shoved Kyle's shoulder. Kyle tried not to smile. But this out here, it's like the distillation of it all, where it really took hold in the 60s. I can see that. Manipulative shysters, naive people desperate to believe in something, in someone. Oh man, where was I? To be someone. Any different now? Who wants to be ordinary? Eh? No one? That's who. Everybody's got to be singing or dancing or drawing attention to themselves. For what? Is there really any talent involved in any of it? Anything meaningful? Is anything really thought through? Anything permanent anymore? Does any of it matter? They can all self-actualize my middle finger. Excuse me. All of them. They can blog me out. Dan chuckled. That's right. Right here. Right there. Your final narration before the credits. You need to drink. I don't. Carl wiped his hand. His eyes sat up. He looked at Dan. I'm done, mate. Just done it. Done it. I need to sleep. I haven't slept in. I can't even remember. I close my eyes, and I can see the road going through the desert. I can see airport queues. I'm watching rushes while the sat-nav is telling me to turn right all night. Really, I'm even scared to go to sleep. It's like it's all got inside me. Like I'm involved with them now. The way Martha looked at me. Carl rolled onto his knees, stood up, grabbed the cigarette packet off the nightstand. Her roof, Dan. He shook his head, lit up. The bloody roof. Bloody roof. Dan shrugged. I'm trying to think about it. Keeping my distance. His eyes were doleful, yet serious. I kept it. Where was I? Dan shrugged. I'm trying not to think about it, keeping my distance. His eyes were doleful, yet serious. I can't explain it unless someone is messing around with us and with Max. Drawing those things on the wall before we get there. Hiding in the cult's buildings to freak out while we're filming. Dan held up his hands. It could be someone trying to scare us off, using some kind of ink that fades under UV light. My flat? The hotel in Keene? It's more believable than what Martha is suggesting, because I won't accept that it's anything else. I just won't, mate. It's the only way I managed to get myself over here to finish this. And by telling myself that even if hauntings are if hauntings are real, I don't know, ghosts, residents, whatever, they can't hurt you. Remember that. Not even after what you've heard from the cops, Emilio. Don't you believe that they, I don't know, called something out in that mine in France? In France, I summoned something. I feel silly even using the words, but come on, it has to be something else. Something we don't have a rational explanation for. Dan shook his head. I see it, and I kind of accept it. For a while. Excuse me. I know, I've had a few wobbles. But then I'm back here in some bar, and my reason kicks in. Denies it all. My instincts are retelling me to run a mile. But I've been getting past that with a bit of logic, mate. Only way I can deal with it and thankfully it's over. The shoe? That horrible little thing on our table. Same things were showing up in the desert. The heavenly letters. But Catherine and Kath. The heavenly letters, what Catherine called them. They must have arrived in the second year in France, the missing year, after Gabriel left. She brought those things to America with her. Martha said she had a collection of them. They must have started to show up first in opportunity. What am I looking for? I'm trying to figure out where I am. What Catherine called them, they must have arrived in the second year in France, the missing year. After Gabriel left, she brought those things over to America with her. Martha said she had a collection of them. They must have started to show up first in Normandy. Could have been planted, and you're taking Martha's word for that. It just appeared. She's unhinged. They all are. My dreams. You think I'm making them up? No, but like I said, you're into this really deep, and I'm not. Martha has the same dreams, the weird limbs, being another body, another body, seeing things. Why? I'm supposed to be recording this, but it's like I'm invading. It's invading me, getting inside, hunting me. Kyle crouched down in front of Dan and his eyes wild again. How is that possible? They had visions in the temples. Now I'm having visions. How does that work? And them all asking, think about it. Susan, White, Bridget, Clover, eh? Why can't Max find anyone? Where was I? Getting inside, hunting me, Kyle crouched down in front of Dan, his eyes wild again. How is that possible? They had visions in the temples. Now I'm having visions. How does that work? And them all dying. Think about it. Susan White. Bridget Clover. Eh? Why can't Max find anyone else for us to talk to? He's looked. You can count on that. I'll wager they're all dead. Dan swigged from his beer can. I wanted to walk away from this, and you had your chance. So now is the time for all this when it's too late. Try and see it in my way. Deal with it or you'll go nuts. And you'll start believing anything. Kyle grimaced. I can't. After a long silence, Dan smiled. Because it's brilliant. Kyle grinned. It is the best thing we've ever done. We'll ever do. You couldn't make this up, but Dan watched him intently again. Kyle exhaled a long plume of smoke. But there has to be a line that you don't cross. Kyle put a hand on Dan's shoulder. It's what you were trying to tell me before I know. And I'm sorry, I mean it. Sorry that I didn't listen. And you're right, I never do. Dan looked down and swallowed. It was Gabriel. You weren't there. I keep thinking of Gabriel. Crying. His legs in that trap. He might not even pull through. What kind of life is he going to have if he does? And Martha sobbing in that tiny kitchen. Conway's face. The way he looked at the dead trees at the mine. The way he was getting himself together to go through the night again. For us. Just for us. Susan White is dead. She actually died while we were making this film. Filmmate. A stroke. You believe that? Bridget Clover killed herself this year. Recently, too real. Like it's happening as the camera is rolling. Luke, this is live news footage of some atrocity. Not history. It's supposed to be history, interviews, locations, narration, speculation. All three, all after the all after the fact, just like the other films. But it's not. So why am I still doing it? So I can win. So I can win. Acclaim, get paid, get laid. Like every other tosser with a project out there. Out there? Am I exploiting these poor where was I? These poor old fools for my own gain? Am I too reckless and desperate to make this film instead and should have instead of just acknowledging that we are in danger and should have quit? Dan shrugged. I guess we're telling the story, mate. The one that hasn't been told, like Max said. And if we don't do, sorry, I guess we're telling the story, mate. The one that hasn't been told, like Max said. If we don't do it, if someone else will. Kyle wasn't sure if Dan was just trying to make him feel better. He didn't know what he thought about any of it anymore, or himself. But he had a horrible suspicion he might have become what he hated. Staring at the end of a cigarette, he said, "But you'll so frustrating. But who'll be left to interview?" Dan raised his bushy eyebrows and shrugged. "Martha gave me the business card our predecessor left with her when he was out here." He launched the card over, pinched between two fingers. Old Malcolm Gonal. His number one is on 3. Maybe talk to him about what he found out. Even he bailed on this. Not heard his name in years. He had hit that with spirit. Did that series called Voices from Beyond for skateboard in the 90s, then not else besides the football hooligan stuff. It was all trash. It was, sacks of it. All the paranormal stuff was faked. Typical ITV trash. He's everything I'm against. He hasn't had a sniff in years. Must have been skint. This where am I? He hasn't had a sniff in years. Must have been skint. This was his comeback. The money Max is throwing around. Ganal would have killed to get on board. Finger Mouse worked with him once a few years ago on some video about a gangster. Said he was a twat. So why would Ganal walk away from this? Give him a call. Ask him. Kyle stared at the business card. I intend to. Better than what, tomorrow afternoon? Kyle stared at the business card. I intend to. Better than that tomorrow afternoon. When we get back, I'm going to round to his place. Right before I go and trip and rip Max a new one and demand some answers about what is going down. Kyle took it out of his wallet, slipped the business card inside. There's no production offices in Cross County. Must work from home. Precisely. Max is scratching around the Colt TV has-beens. Hey. Has-beens. Hey.
Has-beens.
Thank you, honey.
Watch what you say. Has-beens.
Oh.
You stopped at has-beens.
Oh, thank you, honey. Me included. Motive unclear, but I don't believe he's thinking of Sundance or King's. Before you do any of that, will you do me a big favor? Kyle looked at Dan. What? Will you get some sleep? And that is the end of chapter 20. That one... Yeah, that one... I know I've tried to stay away from that with that one. Because it was making conversation. I almost fell asleep a few times there.
Boring chapter.
Mm-hmm. It's like it kind of goes back and forth to where I'm awake, but then I'm not awake. It's like it's interesting, but at the same time it just slows down.
Yeah.
Slow.
That's what you get for horror or thriller.
Yeah.
Slow burn.
So I'm hoping I'm really hoping that this part right here, this whole section right here, I'm really hoping this gets to be really good. I hope it does. And I'm already past an hour on this video right now. So what I'm gonna do for right now, it is almost 5 o'clock. Okay. I need to start. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and just wrap it up here for right now. And we'll see you all in the next video. Hey, at least this time we're gonna start chapter 21 this time. So I hope you all enjoyed this. If you did, please like and subscribe to my channel. Post a comment down below. Tell me your thoughts on the book. Some of you have commented saying that you guys love the book, that you've already been reading it and finishing it. But I hope you all have been enjoying this book. I hope you all have been enjoying it. But yeah, like I said, subscribe to my channel to help us reach at least 200. Right now, at this point in the video, at this point of recording, we have 188. Help me get to 200, please. It would help grow my channel a little bit more. Share my channel with friends, family, and just to help my channel grow. And if you like it, please give this a thumbs up. Hit the bell. Once you subscribe, please hit the bell for more notifications so you don't miss another chapter or two of Last Days. We'll see you all in the next video, and I hope you all have a fantastic evening.